let's explore this, Susan. How about coping with the loss of parents, or even about, let's say, an older sibling, which is number 5 on the Holmes? And I know that this can be tragic and part of growing up. What do you suggest to help us get through this?
Well, one of my friends who's, I think he's about 89 now, and he was a twin. And so his twin died a number of years ago. I remember when his twin died. And whenever Erwin has a birthday party, and I went to his birthday party this summer, they always put both names of the twins on the cake. Oh. And when they send out the invitation, it's for Erwin and whatever his brother's name is. So it's very, very sweet. And Erwin and my dear friend Deborah, his wife, have twin daughters. And so the daughters who are twins really love this. Because you can't imagine, I'm sure, as a twin, I have a very dear friend now who's a twin, and you can't imagine going through part of your life without that. I mean, it's devastating. So it's just like another partner. It's your other twin flame. In many cases, your twin is more your twin flame than your partner ever is, your life partner. So yeah, it's self-empathy, self-empathy, self-empathy. I'm feeling devastated because I need connection with Bob. And breathe. And I'm feeling so scared, and I need to feel safe. I mean, if my twin's dying, I could die, right? And I need to feel safe. Breathe. And I feel heartbroken because I need to feel that love from my twin. Breathe. And I feel really grief-stricken because I've had that twin to hold me and hug me when things are really bad my whole life, ever since we were in the womb together. So I just have a huge need to be comforted. Breathe. And if you do that eventually, and you keep doing it and come up with different rounds of self-empathy, and I can help you with that, eventually you will have a breakthrough and you will be able to get to that peace that surpasses all understanding through surrender. Because that's what happens. It is surrender.
Surrender, and then to find a formula to celebrate what you did have, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Ooh.
Absolutely.
Oh, yummy.
And then learn how to reconnect with that twin on the other side. Because there isn't any reason for you to be separated, because everybody still exists. You know, Sylvie Brown describes it as they're here. They're not somewhere else. They're in another dimension, and if you call out to them, they're here. Just as if you call out to the soul of a friend who's still alive, there's a high probability, if you do that and you practice doing that and there's a lot of love between you, that soul is going to come running. And then, you know, that's how you guys are connected, and then the phone rings. Or you get an email, which happens to me and to many of us all the time.
Happened to me again today. The chills just came up. Hi, I really miss you. It was my attorney. Staying on the good side.
Interesting.
Well, okay. That was on a light note, folks. Now let's explore. Let's talk about one of the skills that you offer that do allow people to really center themselves and cope.
The 4 questions of inquiry is my favorite of all the skills. This is the one you need, because if you're telling yourself a story, a long, lonely life, right, as Gigi said earlier, then you need to stop that. You need to stop it right away. That story is torture for you. That is a guarantee of misery that is ongoing ad infinitum. So you have to look at the story. You know, I'm going to look forward to a long, lonely life, you might say to yourself. Well, is it true? Well, it might be true. What evidence do you have that it's true? Well, John just died. You know, John just died. We were married for 45 years. Okay. What other evidence do you have that it's going to be a long, lonely life? Well, 6 of my best friends are all widows. Okay. Tell me their names. And she tells you, she'll tell me their names. Okay, what other evidence do you have that you're going to endure a long, lonely life? And she looks, well, that's about it. Okay. So how do you feel when you tell yourself that story? Heartbroken, devastated, lost. Well, lost is another story, so you can't say that. So heartbroken, devastated, what's one more feeling? really, really sad. Okay, or she might have said really, really angry, which comes up a lot. Of course it does. Okay, and how will you feel if I can show you a story that's more true, more powerful, and more peaceful? And she thinks, and she says, well, I think I'll feel better. Okay, well, better's a story. Can you give me some feeling words, 3 feeling words? I'll feel hopeful. I'll feel peaceful. I'll feel relieved. Great, perfect. Now we have to do the turnaround. The turnaround's really tricky. You could do 50,000 turnarounds, but how about when I am healed enough to make some new friends, then I will have an interesting life again, and I will have something to look forward to when I wake up in the morning. Yeah, okay. Now that's one of 50,000 turnarounds. So if you didn't like that one, call me or email me or text me and I'll send you another one. But it's up to you. It's whatever your life is about when you talk about the turnarounds. You know, there are 2 people I know who've lost children, and they're fine. They love their children, they miss their children, they're fine. They talk about their child, and you know they're fine. There are people like my grandmother, who was in her 90s, and her beloved oldest child, my uncle, had died, had predeceased her. She never got over it. She didn't have these skills. And I was a child, so I didn't have these skills yet either. But we have a choice because we live in the information age now. You can go online and you can look me up. You can go on YouTube. You can find the 4 questions of inquiry and me teaching it right now. Or you can call me for a free session. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to struggle.
Very helpful, Susan. So suffering, it seems to be the way that humans really learn. And please help us to understand that.
I don't like this any more than you do. I really don't like this. I really resent this. This really makes me feel furious that there's no way for any of us to learn anything except to go through it. And all the denial in the world isn't going to help. And healthy denial is like for 5 minutes and then you face it, or a day or 2 after somebody dies, and then you start dealing with it. 7 days, if you're Jewish, you can sit Shiva for 7 days, and on the 8th day, when everybody leaves your house, the whole point is, you've done your mourning, now you have to get back to life. So that's the message here. You have to be able to move through the experience of pain and grief. And if you've lost a lot of people in a short period of time, as I said I did, my first mother-in-law lost her youngest child, her beloved father, her beloved husband, in a period of like 3 years. It was like 1 a year. She never became bitter. She never became angry. She never became a drug addict. She never became an alcoholic. She just knew this is life. This happens. It shouldn't have happened. It happened. And she was really extraordinary. She was just amazing. What an inspiration.
That's awesome.
And so that's the message. You know, if you have to go through horrible things as I have and as Gigi has, you must go through them. You have to force yourself to acquire enough skills so you can go through them. I'm not saying there's any benefit to go through them unconsciously with blinders on and, you know, earplugs in. That's useless. That you won't suffer, you won't experience anything, and, you know, there's no point. But you have to be able, and I have a lot of skills for you. We only brush the surface in these shows. So I'm just giving you a couple of hints of what I teach my clients. You want to learn this, you want to learn this.
Yes, give her that phone call. You'll be addicted to the information. I am. Now, I know that during many divorces there are grave financial loss due to the divorce and dividing the assets, and also because of the cost of those legal fees, and that, of course, is if they don't use your mediation.
True.
Right?
True. Yes. So there are things you can do to avoid many of these losses, right? So when your marriage starts to go sideways, before anybody thinks about divorce, before anyone starts to fight, before anyone is unhappy, and I mean you, before you're unhappy, don't count on seeing if he or she is unhappy. Don't count on it's his or her fault, so I'm not going to do anything. I was talking to one of my clients yesterday, and he told me some very alarming things that his partner has said, and I said, whoa, wait, wait 1 second. So now you've just run out of road. Now, all the things that you didn't think you needed to learn from me, like self-empathy, empathy for her, self-expression, reflection, clarification, solution, the whole gamut of the 6-part conversation, those things that you didn't think you needed to learn from me, now, based on what your wife said to you, you need to learn it last month. 3 months ago. We have to start on this immediately. So we spent the rest of the session teaching him self-empathy and empathy, giving him some phrases to use when she's really annoyed, teaching him not to defend himself, not to explain himself, and exactly how to handle things, and got him really serious. Because the things he said to me are the precursors to divorce. And nobody wants it that way. Even if you don't want to be married anymore, as I didn't, then the trick would be, if my husband hadn't been on human growth hormone and steroids, the trick would have been to, calmly, peacefully motivate him and make the best deal I could make and get out of there. But you've got to notice when you're unhappy or you're disconnected. Some of you don't have much of an emotional affect where you get angry and sad and scared. That's fine. But if you're disconnected, the writing's on the wall, the clock is ticking down, and if you don't want to lose your home or lose a huge amount of money, you have a chance. If it's soon enough, you could reconcile. You could turn this boat around. I can teach you how to do it.
With great results. Now, how do you go about teaching your clients to get through their financial losses?
Surrender and acceptance. How does someone get over losing a breast in a mastectomy? How does somebody get over losing a limb in war or disease? The loss is there, or the loss is about to be there. So the only way that someone can get through these horrific, horrific losses, and believe me, if you've, lost any tiny little part, you're going to, if you're connected to your body, you're going to feel loss. Because I had fibroids removed, and it was great, and I had a tummy tuck at the same time, and it was fabulous, and I had everything fixed beautifully. I was in better shape than I'd ever been in my life, except when I was a kid. But still, there was that profound experience of having lost tissue that was you. It was very weird that I really felt a certain mourning. And I was describing that to a friend today, that she said, oh, I went through the same thing. There was a sense of loss and mourning when a body part was removed. So if you've never heard of this, and believe me, they didn't teach me any of this. I figured it out, and I did my research, and then I learned it, and then I transformed it, and then I'm at peace about it, So you have to understand, you have to do the work with your mind. You have to turn the story around in your mind and make peace with it and surrender to it and go on. And the degree to which you do this work with me or someone else is the degree to which you'll be ready to have a deeply loving, intimate, joyous relationship and lead somebody else to that. You won't be able to do it if you haven't done your work.
Well, help us to understand how much pain and suffering can we really avoid?
It all depends on you. It all depends on you. Are you somebody who spent 40 years on these skills like me, or are you somebody who doesn't want to and hasn't? Now, believe me, I didn't want to spend a fortune. I didn't want to sit in all those workshops and intensives and retreats and seminars. And particularly the intensives, with Siddha Yoga, I would literally look in the bathroom mirror during breaks and I would say, okay, You got through 25%. Okay, you got through 50%. Okay, 75% now, you know, and I would have to talk to myself. It was really challenging. But I finished it and I got the benefit.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you told me about Patrick Swayze's wife, and that she said that her husband died, which was so powerful, which she said. Please tell everybody about that.
When Patrick Swayze died, and you know, he was the star of Dirty Dancing, she said, he lives within me now. So if you've ever been in love, I invite you to think about that person that way. If anyone you've ever loved in any way, beloved, relative, family member, if anyone you've ever loved has died, I invite you to think of it that way. He lives within me now. Which is true for me. My beloved dog Max lives within me now. My beloved cats live within me now. My beloved former fiance and my best friend live within me now. And I don't mean in a creepy, ghosty kind of way. I mean, I can be present with their energy. I can be present with their wisdom. I can be present with their joy, with their beauty, with their sweetness, with humor, with their wit, all of that whenever I choose. And you can as well. And then, of course, as Sylvia Browne says, you're going to see them on the other side anyway. And the other side is like right here. You know, so if you have a spirit guide, the spirit guide theoretically is right here, standing on your right. And everybody else that you're interested in having a communication with is theoretically right here. They're right here. I just got chills, so maybe they are right here, right this minute.
Oh, yeah. They roam in the studio, Susan. Well, I can see that we have a quick clip to go into, and we'll be right back for more exploration. Or perhaps we don't
Maybe
have
not.
time for the clip?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Let's go into the next question. It occurred to me this 15 or so years ago, I didn't even pay attention when a guy was obsessed with me and pursuing me. I didn't have any empathy for him. I didn't feel like letting him down easy until I got a lot older, until I was in my, let's say, 40s and mid and late 40s. So when I was in my 20s and 30s and guys were crazy about me, if I wasn't interested, I just wasn't interested. You know, they might call and I might talk to them. Then they'd ask me for a date and I'd say no. And then they'd call again. And my mother, I think, was the one who'd say, oh, you know, I can see that this one's really, you know, really crazy about you. Oh, really? You know, I didn't even notice. And that's what happens when we really don't have much empathy, and most young people don't. We may be suffering enormously about somebody else, what someone else is going through, but then when the roles are reversed, it doesn't even occur to us. So don't take it personally if you're pursuing somebody and she doesn't even think about letting you down easy. She just hasn't thought about it.
Oh, that's very considerate for you to point out, and very truthful as well. I've gotten some lectures about that from Mother myself.
Well, you know, tragic relationships, what do tragic relationships all have in common? And if you look at tragic situations in history, if you look at tragic movies like Splendor in the Grass with Warren Beatty and Natalie Wood, was one of my favorite movies ever. I don't know, how old was I? Maybe 16, 17, something like that. That's a heartbreaking film. Why? Because the guy doesn't have the courage to stand up, and I don't want to ruin, you know, spoiler alert, don't want to ruin the story, but, you know, Warren Beatty's character didn't have the courage to stand up to certain pressures. Well, that's exactly the situation with Romeo and Juliet. That's exactly the situation with West Side Story. If you look, you know, Eloise and Abelard, you can go back to the 1500s probably or before, and you're going to find stories that have a common denominator, because in those cultures, men were in charge. So the man was in charge. If the man didn't behave in a way that allowed these lovers to be together, you have a tragic story on your hands. And that's something to really pay attention to. If you're a woman, does the guy you're in love with, if he feels the same way, does he have the courage to move forward if there's any kind of conflict? And if you're a guy, if you're a man, do you have the courage to move forward and follow your heart and be rational about it? But do you have the courage to do what you have to do? It's really important.
That is very important. Courage, persistence. Yes. Oh, and appreciate it. Usually things can transform from that.
Yes.
Well,
But not always.
yeah, oh yeah. No stalking. Okay,
Right.
we're clear on that one.
Right, yes.
Well, I'm curious what your definition of love is.
My favorite, you know. When your needs getting met are as important, I can't believe a Freudian slip. When your partner's needs getting met are as important to you as your own needs getting met, that's what I call love. Very few people have this understanding. Most people fall into the camp where it's all about their needs getting met. And then some people fall into the camp where it's all about their partner's needs getting met. Now, if you have to pick, you'd rather have a friend who's all about her partner's needs getting met, right? But that does have problems. In the long run, that person will become resentful and will get angry. So, you know, in the work that I do with couples, it falls into one of two categories. Either I'm working with the partner who's all about himself or herself, very left-brained, me, or I'm working with the other partner who's all about contributing and making life more wonderful for you and all that, and then by the time they find me, it's because they're so furious they could kill you. So you have to make sure wherever you fit in that model that you work very hard to balance it out.
Very realistic clip there. Crime of passion. Oh gosh, okay, well, let's explore this now. I know that sometimes it seems as if grief, it really does occur. It comes in waves. Why is that?
Because you're distracted by something. You know, you get busy with life. You want to get busy with life. You don't want to die too. And then suddenly you remember. So it's really just a function of remembering. And I've just finished a wonderful, wonderful book by my favorite author, Ann Tyler. And Fred, if you would just show that book cover, I'd really appreciate it. The Beginner's Goodbye. And in this book, thank you. In this book, there are so many wonderful quotes. Thank you, Fred. There's so many wonderful quotes, and one of them is, he's talking about why his wife suddenly shows up, and it's right at the beginning of the book you find out what this is all about, right on the inside cover, you know, that his wife is visiting him. And he says, maybe it's just a long, long way to travel, and that's why it took Dorothy all those months to come back. Or maybe she had first tried to do without me, the way I had first tried to do without her, to get over my loss, find closure, move on, all those ridiculous phrases people use when they're urging you to endure the unendurable. So when you think about it, endure the unendurable. When you've loved and been loved to that degree, and now you are required by life to do without that person, I call it unendurable. I mean, I truly, truly do. And yeah, you have to live through it because you're not being given an alternative and we're not suicidal. And that wouldn't solve anything anyway. So you just have to learn how to turn this into surrender and peace.
Absolutely. There we go with the battlefield of the mind caller. Well, okay, let's talk about a fresh start. How do we even get there?
Okay. So again, Ann Tyler. But the odd thing was, right at that moment, I realized that I had survived it. I pictured Anne-Marie's friend waking up this morning, the first full day of her life without her husband, and I thanked heaven that I was past that stage myself. Even though I still felt a constant ache, I seemed unknowingly to have traveled a little distance away from the first unbearable pain. I sat up straighter and drew a deep breath, and it was then that I began to believe that I really might make my way through this.
Very heartfelt.
She's just a genius, Anne Tyler, just a genius. So how did he get there? Well, of course, read the book, but how did he get there? He got there because he was able to have the time to get over the unendurable loss. And he says, she was one of a kind. She left a hole behind. I felt as if I'd been erased, as if I'd been ripped in two. And if you've lost your beloved, if you've lost your best friend, you will have had that feeling.
Just the facts. Now, Sylvia Browne said something in a talk that you're listening to not long ago about losing loved ones. Please share what that was about.
Yeah, she said you must constantly remind yourself that they're all around you, as I said, and that was from Sylvia. They're all around you all the time. They're not in some, other place high above the planet Earth or off to the side, someplace called heaven, or 50 different heavens, depending on what your religion or belief system is. She says they're just in another dimension, and they're right here. Now, they may not be following around morning, noon, and night, and you will see them when you go to the other side. And there's enough scientific data that seems reasonable if you read enough of it. Enough very brilliant doctors have done this research, and millions of people like me have had near-death experiences. So I had an experience where I was no longer in my body, and I described that in one of your shows, Gigi. So if you do the reading, it will support you in eliminating grief. If you go to people's bedsides at hospice to volunteer, you will see them getting a look on their face where they see somebody at the end of the bed. Or in the case of my mother, when my mother passed away, there were 3 of us who saw this person in different ways. Actually, I'm sorry, there were 4 of us. My mother saw him and sat up in bed and never spoke again. It was 10 days before she died. Her nurse's aide, who was in the bedroom, literally saw him walk through the bedroom door, face my mother, turn left, and walked into my mother's bathroom. My mother's morning nurse's aide, who hadn't come on duty yet, awakened 60 miles away, sat up in bed, and said, "Mrs. Laufer needs me, and I'm going to get dressed, and I'm going to go in early." So she arrived like an hour or so before her shift started. And I, in the guest room, was freaking out, feeling this weird ghost-like energy, and saying to myself, do I have to get out of bed? Do I have to check on my mother? Well, the nurse's aide is right there. I'm sure she's fine, and if they're not fine, they'll yell for me. And I did not want to get out of bed. I felt this weird, creepy, like freezing energy. And it was actually a person, So there were 4 of us who experienced this simultaneously. So that was just one of many experiences I've had that convinced me that, we are not all that there is, those of us who still have, flesh and bones and all that there's more to humanity and there's more to the world than we know.
What an adventure.
Life is.
Yeah.
And isn't that the approach? So that we have to really look at it as an adventure. As Helen Keller said, my favorite quote, life is either a great daring adventure or nothing. And Gigi and I, we're working on this all the time. Not only because we're creating shows for you, but we're working on this all the time.
Absolutely. Morning, night, and noon. Well, okay, so ultimately, it's about enjoying the love that you felt and that you had, correct?
You know, when I found out that Linnea and Alexis were most likely going to die, when each of them was going to die, and there was a space of years in between, you know, I had to really gather my mind under my control. As my friend who's a master rower says, before every race, he's over his oars. And I asked him what that meant. I mean, I could see the picture, but what does that mean? He said he prepares himself for what is going to be physical pain, because, you know, you keep rowing even if the lactic acid is in your muscles and it hurts. So you keep it up, that's how you win a race. So he gathers himself, he's over his oars, and since I learned about this, I have had those moments. Now I understand it differently from the way I had. I've learned something really valuable. So when I was facing my best friend's death, and she was not my first best friend to have died, my best friend in elementary school and high school had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which led to her death. So this was, you know, something I didn't know when Janie wasn't my best friend anymore when she died, but it was still devastating. So I was over my oars and I gathered my mind, and I knew that I was going to be there for Linnea any way that I could. I knew that I was going to be there with myself, be present with it, right? So that's what we have to do, be completely present with it, and not make up any negative stories, because that's not going to help you. So just be present, be in the moment, notice that I'm here to do anything I can to help, and that's that. And live in the moment. And then, as soon as she was no longer able to communicate with me, then connect with her in the other planes, the etheric plane, the astral plane. And for you, if you don't know how to do that, and then you learn. It's the motivation. We learn from suffering.
Yes, absolutely. Bottom line, we go through it. Thank you so much, Susan. I
So
just really enjoyed this show. There's more depth to it, but we don't have enough time.
Yes, yes, next one.
And as you've heard, you can survive loss. But the question to ask yourself is, how are you going to do that? And are you going to struggle and suffer and just survive, or are you going to learn these skills that you need to heal and thrive? Sounds good to me. If you want the latter, please contact Susan for a complimentary session. So at any rate, I just wanted to let you know that Susan's available. You can go to Susan, her website, and that's heartspacesolutions.com, and also her email, susan@susanallan.org, and YouTube channel, youtube.com/SusanAllan2001. And that magical phone number with the free 1 hour, what a gift, that is 805-695-8405.